Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's online lecture, Leadership and Trust. Now, most people that recognise good leadership also identify the importance of trust. So to explain this further, let's look at two types of leaders. Let's call them Leader A and Leader B. Now, Leader A, employees might say something like, yeah, he's a good leader, but I'm just not sure if I can fully trust him. This person, this leader, has a cap, a lid, a limit to their leadership capacity because they really haven't developed that honesty and integrity. It's a character issue, and they haven't engaged and developed a relationship to the point where their employees or followers respect and trust them enough to fall under their authority and do as they're directed. They probably will, but it's an awkward relationship because trust isn't there, and that's a key part of trait theory, which we'll look at this week when we talk about leadership. Okay, let's compare that then to Leader B. Leader B, we might hear the employees say something like, she's an okay leader, but I feel as though I can really trust her. This leader, Leader B, has an unlimited amount of potential and capacity because as she gains experience and as she develops leadership skills even further, because the trust is there, again, the fuel, the catalyst for that ongoing relationship is going to ignite performance in this particular work team, because trust and leadership, they go together. It's so important that trust is developed when leaders and followers get together in the workplace. Okay, so followers can be members of a work team, they could be members of a department, employees. We're going to use the words employees and followers interchangeably here. We're also going to, from time to time, relate these frameworks to leadership, but also management. But when we talk about the differences between leadership and management, it really, again, depends on the context. It's all contingent. So, contingency theory, one of the frameworks that we'll look at this week in leadership. Okay, let's get started. The first model is called the leader behavior model. The leader behavior model by Tenenbaum and Schmidt. And this is a concept that's depicted along a continuum. I know we've looked at quite a few of these already. So on the left-hand side of the continuum, we have leader-centered. So the focus is on the leader. The behavior is leader-centered. On the right side of the continuum, the behavior is employee-centered. Employee-centered. So leader on the left, follower on the right, or manager on the left, employee on the right, also could be boss-centered. Okay, so different ways in which we can explain this framework. So the style of leadership, according to Tenenbaum and Schmidt, is autocratic in this leader-centered environment. Now, there are occasions, contexts where this is appropriate. Think of the military, for example. Highly regulated industries, perhaps the security industry or the police force, where commands and therefore control is important, an autocratic style of leadership. But we find over the years that this is not necessarily a type of leadership or a leadership style that is productive or fruitful in all contexts. Okay, we'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. Let's go back to the framework though and consider the right-hand side of the model. The employee-centered style or behaviour of leadership is called laissez-faire. Laissez-faire. This is where the employees have a lot of autonomy. A lot of the control measures, that maybe even the goal setting, a lot of the structures, activities is really handed over to the employees. Another way that we might compare these two different types of leadership styles is the level of autonomy. So over on the right-hand side, there's high levels of autonomy. On the left-hand side, low levels of autonomy. Other leadership frameworks would say, well, maybe when we've got brand new employees that really haven't developed the skills, they don't have the experience in this particular organisation yet, they're immature in terms of the organisational context and the industry, then this might be an appropriate leadership style. Conversely, if there is a mature workforce with lots of experience, qualifications, the professional industries, then perhaps this is the most appropriate leadership style. In the middle of the continuum, I guess where the majority of businesses and industries would accept a particular leadership style as being participative. So we've realised in studying organisations over many decades now that the participative leadership is becoming more and more common, whereas before, certainly through the 1950s, 1960s, it was almost the default position to be autocratic leadership, and still we see quite a lot of autocratic leadership in organisations today. Okay, so an autocratic leader might say something like, well, you do as I say. A laissez-faire leader might say, well, you do as you like. Whereas a participative leader would say to their employees, let's do this together. There's a participative approach. Okay, that's our first framework for this week. Let's have a look at our second leadership model. Okay, now in case you're wondering, or have been wondering all semester, I seem to be taking this whiteboard and overdoing the rubbing out of the whiteboard marker. The first one's a damp cloth and then the second one dries it off. Okay, just in case you were wondering. All right, second leadership framework by Blake and Mountain is called the leadership grid, also referred to as the management grid. Two dimensions, or two concerns. The first one is the concern for people. So this is one of those frameworks where we take the X and Y axes, we lay out the two dimensions, and we identify them as being either high or low. So a leader can be assessed or evaluated as having either high, medium or low concern for people. So this is the extent to which they form relationships. We've just talked briefly about the importance of trust, and relationships involves, of course, the aspect of trust and also respect and honesty and integrity and those other similar concepts. But this particular leader or manager values and sees as important the relationship between them and their followers or work team members. Down here on the x-axis, we look at a dimension called the concern for people. The concern for tasks, rather. We've just covered concern for people. Tasks or production. The concern for production. So it's those tasks, those activities. It's all about, let's get this done. Here's the list of things we've got to do today. Let's just get in and do it. Here's our strategy for the next 5 years. Now let's get in and do it. The concern is about the output of the task, not so much for the relationship. If they're high in their leadership style in terms of the dimension concern for tasks or production. Okay, so from this, we can identify, according to Blake and Mountain, 5 different leadership styles. The first one is when we consider that a leader or a manager has a low concern for people and a low concern for production. that's pretty useless, really. The framework calls this an impoverished leadership style. It's impoverished. In other words, it's underwhelming. It's unproductive. The relationships are low, concern for task and production low. If we've identified a leader or manager in this area, they've probably reached their expiry date, and it's time for them to think about moving on to another activity, another role, another organisation maybe. Maybe leadership's not for them. Right, let's have a look at the second leadership style, and that is a leader that has high concern for people. It's all about the relationships, forming relationships. They're probably motivated by affiliation, according to McClelland's motivation theory that we looked at last week. But they don't have the concern for the output, the tasks, the production. So this would be a great place to work. It'd be a great leader to work under, to work with. And Blake and Mountain would call this a country club style of leadership, where it's a great environment to be around, but not much gets done. And so, again, that's not really going to be beneficial long-term for the organisation. Let's take the other extreme of that. A manager or leader that has a high concern for production or tasks, a high concern for activity, they're really motivated to get things done, maybe highly motivated by achievement or maybe power, but at the same time, they don't really form relationships with people. They don't take the time to understand the different attributes and the different skill sets and the different backgrounds and viewpoints of their team members. It's just, you do as I say, probably more of an autocratic leadership style if we think about the behavioural model we just considered. But Blake and Mountain calls this particular style task managers. Task managers or task management or task leaders. The fourth style of leader is one that has a medium level of concern for people and a medium level of concern for production, and is identified as a middle-of-the-road manager, according to the framework. Middle-of-the-road management would suggest that this particular leader is on their way to becoming a good leader. Perhaps they just need a little bit more experience. They need to just spend a little bit more time understanding the different attributes of the work team, and they just need to become a little bit more focused. Maybe they're easily distracted, because Blake and Mountain, the implication of this framework is that the ideal should be that we aim for, as leaders, high concern for production, high concern for people, and become team managers. Team management is a style of leadership that is going to be productive, it's going to lead to high performance, it's going to be all those concepts that we talked about a few weeks ago, where we can develop a team, where we get the concept of synergy, where everyone's doing a job that they appreciate, that's well matched to their skill set, and they're energized and they're motivated, and they want to actually work for this person because they value them. There's trust because there's high concern for relationship. Trust is important, honesty is important, integrity is important. If someone feels as though they've had any wrongdoing, or if there's any inequity, then this becomes a high concern for this particular type of leader or manager. And they want to fix it, want to problem solve, reduce conflict, attend to any grievances. At the same time, they're very goal-oriented toward getting the task done in a timely manner, effectively and efficiently, with minimal use of resources. So it's both. It's not either or, it's both. Great managers, great leaders have a team management approach, according to Blake and Mountain. All right, let's look now at the third framework for this week. Go over the board with the damp cloth. And again with the dry it all off, ready for our next framework. Okay. So our third framework for this week is one by Robert House called Pathgoal Theory. What I like about this theory is it's one of the contingency theories of leadership. Hopefully by now we've recognised that it's all contingent in management. So organisations come in all shapes and sizes. Styles and industry sectors all mean that organisations are different, vastly different. We've looked at different types of environmental factors, like whether they're operating in industries that are complex and dynamic with many fast-moving changes within their industry. So it is important that we understand that concepts of management, concepts of leadership, as well as all of the other frameworks that we've considered, is different depending on the different aspects of business. So the size of the organisation, the age of the organisation, the location of the organisation, all mean that there are different contingencies that can change the way in which we might solve problems, improve situations, and so on. So Pathgoal Theory takes 4 different leadership styles, very similar to Tannenbaum and Schmidt's leader behaviour model. There are 4 different styles. The first one is directive, very similar to autocratic, a directive leadership style. And as I've already mentioned, appropriate in some contexts. It all depends. It's contingent, right? The next one is a supportive. A supportive leadership style is one that considers the different viewpoints of the employees and followers and supports them, encourages them along the way. Participative is the third one, according to Robert House. Participative. This is where the participation with employees or work team members is at an even greater level. Not only is there support, but there's also some delegation and some exchange of responsibility and accountability toward the employee. So we're heading up toward the other end of the continuum, but certainly not laissez-faire, more in the middle, the participative style. Okay, finally is the achievement-oriented. Achievement-oriented. Hopefully not achievement only, because if we go back to the previous framework we looked at, we would see that the high focus on achievement, low focus on relationships is not always necessarily a good leadership style, but nonetheless may be appropriate for some particular industries. Achievement-oriented is one that sets goals and is absolutely dedicated to achieving those goals, whether they be long-term, 3 to 5 years strategic, or short-term, day-to-day operational. So these are the 4 leadership styles that Pathgoal Theory says is appropriate depending on the circumstances, because it's all contingent. It's a contingency theory. So if we look at the ultimate end goal, there might be 3 things we look at: performance, productivity. Now I know we've said throughout semester that in some of the areas that we've looked at, performance and productivity mean the same thing. This stage we're saying, well, productivity is one of the measures of performance, and satisfaction. Because I think it's important to embrace and understand a concept. We think about it more generically initially, but then as we go throughout the semester, as we go throughout our life experiences, we can see that, oh no, actually there are some differences, but this is part of the learning. Hopefully we've been able to provide that initial concept, and then we get a greater knowledge as we expand throughout the semester. All right, now contingency theory says, well, it all depends. We've got these moderating variables, if you like, that, well, in terms of knowing which is the most appropriate leadership style, whether it be directive, supportive, participative or achievement oriented, it really all depends on the context. We might have these external environmental factors, or there could be internal environmental factors. So the original framework looked at employee factors versus environmental factors. But since the framework was delivered and provided to the management literature, we've seen that it can be even more than those initial contingency attributes or factors. It could be anything. It could be those attributes that we talked about previously: the size of the organisation, the type of industry sector, the location of the organisation, the age and so on. It could be the skills and attributes of each of the work members, their experience, their qualifications. A whole range of different factors can moderate or can influence the extent to which these individual leadership styles is most appropriate for the organisation, and which leads to the highest level of performance, the highest level of productivity, highest level of satisfaction. Okay, so that's just an introduction to some of the key frameworks for this week, leadership and trust. We're going to discuss these in far more detail in the workshops, and also look forward to seeing those comments on discussion board. So we look forward to all that conversation, and we'll see you soon.